Okay, the book of Ezekiel is a fascinating blend of vivid visions, prophetic warnings, and powerful promises of restoration. Ezekiel, a prophet living in Babylon during the exile, now he is tasked with delivering God's messages to rebellious people. Let's dive into the book with major events and themes, tying in some contemporary applications along the way. The background is he was among the Israelites exiled to Babylon, as I mentioned. This is after the first wave of the Babylonian invasion of Judah in 597 BC. He prophesied during a time when the people were grappling with the loss of their homeland, their temple, and as a nation, their identity. Ezekiel's message is one of judgment, accountability, and ultimate hope. It's a story of God's justice and his relentless desire to bring his people back to him. 1 to 3, these three chapters talk about Ezekiel's call and commissioning. The book begins with an astonishing vision of God's glory. Uh, Ezekiel sees a storm, four living creatures, and a great throne. This vision reminds us of God's majesty and power. God commissions Ezekiel as a watchman for Israel, giving him the responsibility to warn the people of their sin. Pretty much like Isaiah, we see Isaiah seeing a vision of God seated on the throne, and he was commissioned after that. So we are also called to speak the truth. We are called to be witness for God in our communities. When we see wrong, we are encouraged to address it with love and truth, pointing others toward God. 4 to 7 chapters talk about signs and warnings. Ezekiel uses dramatic symbols to convey God's judgment. He lies on his side, builds a model of Jerusalem under siege, and eats bread baked over dung, symbolizing scarcity during the siege. These acts were vivid warnings of the coming destruction. God often calls us to act out our faith in ways that seem strange to others, but are we willing to stand out for Him even when it is uncomfortable? 8 to 11 chapters, the temple's corruption. Ezekiel has a vision of the temple in Jerusalem where he sees shocking idolatry. God's glory departs from the temple, symbolizing His judgment and sorrow over their sin. Our worship really matters. Are there idols like money, success, or relationships that take the place of God in our hearts? So these chapters they challenge us to examine our spiritual priorities. So 12 to 24 uh, through parables and symbols and direct prophecies, Ezekiel warns of Jerusalem's fall. He uses examples like a useless wine, a pot of boiling water, and unfaithful spouses to illustrate Israel's rebellion. These chapters remind us of the consequences of turning away from loving God, but they also remind us of His patience as He constantly calls us back to Him. Now, 25 to 32 chapters, primarily judgment on the nations, like how we saw in the book of Isaiah as well as Jeremiah. Ezekiel shifts focus to surrounding nations like Ammon, Moab, and Egypt. God holds them accountable for their pride, cruelty, and idolatry. These chapters emphasize God's sovereignty over all nations. God is just and He sees everything. It's a reminder that His justice will prevail even when we see evil in the world around us. 33 to 34 chapters, a new watchman and the good shepherd. God reaffirms Ezekiel's role as a watchman but shifts to messages of hope. He promises to rescue his people and describes himself as a good shepherd who will care for his flock. Jesus later identifies himself as the good shepherd, fulfilling this prophecy. It's a comforting reminder that God knows, cares for, and protects each of us personally. 35 to 37 chapters, restoration and renewal. Ezekiel speaks of hope and restoration. The famous vision of the valley of dry bones in chapter 37 symbolizes Israel's revival. God promises to breathe life into what seems dead, to restore his people to their land. This chapter is a powerful reminder that God can bring life to the dead areas of our lives, whether broken dreams, relationships, or faith. 38 to 39, Gog and Magog, famous portion. These chapters describe a future battle where God defeats powerful enemies. While interpretations vary related to the eschatological understanding, the key message is clear. God is in control and will ultimately triumph over all evil. No matter how chaotic or uncertain the world seems, God's victory is certain. We can live with this confidence in His sovereignty. 40 and 40 to 48 chapters, the new temple, we get to see the new temple and God's presence being restored here. Ezekiel concludes with a detailed vision of a new temple and the return of God's glory. The book ends with a beautiful promise: the Lord is there. Shammah, 48th chapter, 35th verse. It's a reminder that God desires to dwell with his people forever. God's ultimate goal is to restore us to a perfect relationship with him. This is fulfilled in Jesus, who is God with us, Emmanuel, and points forward to the New Jerusalem in Revelation. This is very important to live that place, New Jerusalem, as a with that perspective. Yeah, the book of Ezekiel is a journey from judgment to hope. It's a sobering reminder of God's justice, but also a celebration of his mercy and grace. Ezekiel's visions challenges to take sin seriously, trust in God's sovereignty, and cling to his promises of restoration. When life feels dry, like a valley of bones, Ezekiel reminds us that God can breathe life into anything. He is the good shepherd and who never gives up upon his sheep, and he is preparing a future where his presence will never leave us. May God give the insights as we go through chapter by chapter how the idolatry of the people caused God to grieve and leave the temple, and this promise of restoring His presence, and the way this book ends as a beautiful closing, and the Lord is there. Such a powerful and wonderful uh, promise for each one of us. No matter how far you go away from the Lord as an individual and as His church, we have this hope and promise. God bless you.